Hey guys, Grain here. I recently caught up to One Piece as of chapter 1112, and as of recording this video, I'm sure as most of you know, chapter 1114 recently came out. If you haven't seen or read the chapter already, go read the chapter, come back and maybe watch this video. This video is going to be really short, but effectively what I've done is make a theory video of 5 potential missing links about Joyboy. Now, from what we know as of the most recent chapter, Joyboy was the first pirate ever, and he came into what we can only assume is Elbaf, since he had interaction with potentially the sun god Nika, who is also from Elbaf. So, without further ado, let me just get straight into what are the 5 missing links about Joyboy. First is the giant straw hat we saw from chapter 906, was most likely belonged to Joyboy since he was the first pirate. This means that prior to Joyboy there was no other pirate, meaning there was no other reason to sail the seas in the first place. From what we know that his iconic appearance is the stretchy limbs, similar to sun god Nika from Elbaf, which we have yet to get once we get to Elbaf. The second thing is, most likely, his iconic appearance might have been the straw hat, the giant straw hat, as well as his stretchy limbs. Now, I've theorized that maybe the reason why he had stretchy limbs, or why was similar to Nika in that way, is potentially maybe he had Nika, the sun god Nika fruit, Hito model Nika. Maybe he had that. Or maybe he trained directly under Nika's descendant of some sort when he traveled to Elbaf. Second thing, this is more of a stretch, is I think Joyboy himself was probably a human, maybe even a buccaneer, who knows. But if he was a human, then he probably had a child, right? Human and child with maybe a giant, which could explain the fact that buccaneers ended up being hunted down as per Kuma's backstory, which we know. This would also explain why the buccaneers were not only hunted down, but enslaved by the world government. And this, I think, for the most part, I think this is a move from the world government, because they effectively wanted to make sure that nobody like Joyboy would rise again. This is all speculation, of course, but if Joyboy was in fact a buccaneer, it would explain the large straw hat, would explain his stretchy limbs based on sun god Nika, but also tie into the whole Kuma aspect, which would also explain why the world government would inevitably hunt down buccaneers, because they didn't want any more rebels. So as a result, the buccaneers were hunted down, from what we know from the Kuma backstory. And this also raises the point, since we know that the buccaneers are effectively taller than regular humans and have some sort of giant blood, and they had believed in Nika, most of their religious beliefs are revolved around Nika. Maybe it could be a problem with proximity. So maybe the buccaneers originally lived near Elbaf, maybe their original island or wherever they lived was near Elbaf, and so because of sheer proximity and word spreading around, they ended up developing the same beliefs. That could be a thing. Number 3, and this is a little bit more interesting. Pangaea Castle, which is in the headquarters at Marijoa, is oddly named. Like, one of the things that struck out to me first is, why is it called Pangaea Castle? Which then brought me to the idea that if there was no need for sailing prior to Joyboy, right, since he was the first pirate, maybe there's a concept that the Pangaea Castle was actually the headquarters or the center of the ancient kingdom, or named after the ancient kingdom, because of how it was able to harbor all races and tribes and creatures on singular ancient kingdom. Kind of like how Pangaea actually exists in the real world, collection of different continents. So singular continent, no need to travel up beyond that. And so if they worked in harmony, it's quite possible Pangaea Castle is kind of a hint or reference to the time before the sailing, before potentially the Great Flood, which I will get to the next point. But I believe, and this is just speculation of course, I believe the ancient kingdom was perfectly sustained and filled with different tribes working together in harmony before the 20 or rather 19 kingdoms that we know that currently run Marijoa from the empty throne, who inevitably destroyed the ancient kingdom and created the Red Line. So that's there. Number 4, which is what I was getting to. Based on chapter 1113, we know that the flood happened a while ago, a long time ago. So it's maybe it's possible that the first time the flood ever happened was effectively right before Joyboy set sail, which would effectively make him the first pirate, because you can't sail the seas if there's no sea in the first place. So if the flood actually happened, then that would give reason to, for Joyboy to sail across the seas, because he now has to make relationships with all the other races that previously he could walk on land and travel there, but now since most of it has been destroyed or filled with the flood, he now has to set sail. So that explains that. The other thing, and this is a theory I've been seeing floating around the internet and everywhere, is we know from what Vegapunk had specified that devil fruits basically come from the will of somebody in the past, basically imagination, and then it manifesting into reality. Maybe the entire concept of devil fruits stemmed from the loss of life from the people who drowned in the flood way back when, even before Joyboy. And so as a result, maybe the first set of devil fruits started manifesting as early as when Joyboy started to set sail, which could explain why he potentially got the Nika fruit, or maybe the other fruits. So that's something to think about. Point number 5, and this one's going to be a little bit big. If Joyboy was the first pirate, then he probably went to every kingdom that existed at the time, before the first flood, to make allies. And so when the flood happened, since most of the land was lost, most of the tribes then got split and each one became an independent island. I believe that Joyboy ended up going to different islands, like he met with the Zhao, he met with the people of Ohara, he ended up meeting with Wano, the island samurai, he went to Elbaf, the island of the giants, he went to Fishman Island, and then eventually, he might have at some point also gone to Alabasta. I believe he probably realized that it would be impossible to defeat, the world government at the time. And so he then went to the scholars of Ohara to try and figure out how he can send a message to those of us in the future, Luffy and the rest of them, as of current moment, on how they can come up with a script to try and give a message. Which obviously he went probably after learning the truth about what's going to happen, most likely the flood or whatever we will see when we get to the final war. But I believe he went to Ohara to learn about the coming future. Inevitably, at some point, he traveled to Wano to meet with the Kozuki family, obviously, because they're the only ones that knew how to, inscribe things on a poneglyph and make it. At some point, he also went to the Fisherman Island for the promise that he kept in order to raise the Noah and set sail, alongside Poseidon. So that was there. But I think what happened is he realized at some point in his life that he was either not going to succeed and in beating the world government, because people hadn't accustomed to the idea of setting sail. The concept of being a pirate wasn't there yet. Technology probably hadn't been developed high enough to combat the world government. Or the second reason is maybe he knew he was dying. And so if he knew he was dying, he knew he would be unable to accomplish his goals. And so knowing what he knew, he probably decided to inscribe all of it onto the poneglyphs, so that a future Joyboy, someone who actually can unify the rest of them, someone who isn't suffering from the sickness, someone who comes from a time period where even though the world government has come, they still have the ability to keep freedom at the forefront, the ability to unite different races, different tribes together. He knew somebody like that would inevitably appear in the future, and so as a result, he decided to create the poneglyphs, obviously. But more than that, that's probably the reason he decided not to hold his promise with the fishermen, because it would have been too difficult for them to have gone through the effort of sending reinforcements and everybody gathered onto the Noah only to take a big loss. And so as a result, he realized he didn't want the fishermen to suffer, and maybe the fishermen inevitably would end up feeling oppression. And so he apologized for what might happen. This could also be the reason why he asked Zunisha potentially to carry Zoe on it, because he knew the flood would come. And so as a result, he had no choice but to ensure that Zunisha would walk across the ocean forever. I believe that Joyboy's crew had people from everywhere. I believe they had maybe potentially a fisherman, a giant, a buccaneer. Well, if he was a buccaneer, then a giant. Potentially somebody, Queen Nefertari Lily. Maybe even the Tontadas. Somebody, we don't know. We still have yet to get to Elbaf, so then once we get there, it'll probably be explained a lot more. But I'm sure Joyboy, being the first pilot, probably took the time and effort to try and bond with everybody and get inculcated in their culture, so that he could try and achieve his goal. But unfortunately, just as Joyboy had expected, the world government inevitably found him, killed him, and that's why the Straw Hat landed in Marijoa and is imprisoned there. But fortunately for what we know, Nefertari Lily is the reason why the poneglyphs were split away. If the world government at the time had seized control of the poneglyph, then the future as a whole probably would never have existed. And so I believe somebody or some way, Nefertari Lily ended up finding out about the future, whether it was being told by somebody who had the ability to see the future, whether it was told by Joyboy himself, or whether it was someone else. We're not too sure about the details on that. But if she did find the future, she then had to transport the poneglyphs across the world by herself or with the remaining crew, which she could have done, set different, regions of her crew and set them to take poneglyphs independently, different locations. Or, and this is a lot more interesting theory, it would be interesting if somehow the pawpaw fruit, which we still haven't seen awoken, has a bigger tie narratively to the ancient kingdom and to the history of One Piece. If Nefertari Lily did end up getting some sort of fruit, I believe it would be convenient if she actually ended up getting the pawpaw fruit, because if that was the case, she could have touched different poneglyphs and transported them freely elsewhere. The other thing is, I'm not too sure what happened to her afterwards, but I don't think anybody has any theories on that yet, but maybe we'll find out soon. Can't wait to get to Elbaf, because that's going to be a thing. Ooh, fun fact. Small details, just something I've been thinking about. We know about the Adam and Eve tree, and we know that the tree of knowledge that existed in Ohara was huge, right? I believe that the Eve tree was actually the tree of knowledge that was on Ohara that got destroyed. And so we know there's a tree similar to like that or in that size on Elbaf. So who knows if that tree is actually the Adam tree, then I don't doubt that there isn't a possibility that both the tree of knowledge on Ohara and the tree on Elbaf are somehow related to each other. Maybe they were planted at the same time, maybe they're different, we're not too sure. But if that was the case, then maybe potentially the history of knowledge, the knowledge of stuff that we've learned was lost in Ohara, might not actually be lost entirely. maybe it survived, or maybe there's a way to recover it in Elbaf when we get to Elbaf. Maybe the tree on Elbaf might have some of the same properties, might give us some additional answers. So that's there. Also post Elbaf, which obviously I believe Elbaf will easily be at least 100 chapters. There's no way we're getting less than 100 chapters. It's easily 100 chapters, guaranteed. But post Elbaf, we're probably going to go to Lodestad, which I haven't seen many people talk about. Most people just think we're going to Laughdale, but people forget that Lodestad is technically the last island on the Grand Line, and it's the last official island on the Grand Line, which means that a lot of people will converge there, because that is where Roger technically stopped last on the Grand Line before they actually ended up heading towards Laughdale, if they find Laughdale. So who knows? But that's it. Those are my 5 links for Joyboy that may or may not come true. Let me know what you guys think. Send your, give this video a like, give it a comment, make sure your notification bell is on. Whatever your comment is, post it down below, and maybe depending on what you guys say, whatever you like, the most liked comment, I might make a video on it in the future. But for now, that's it. See you guys.